The worst of classic WoW. Okay, let's have a look.
Classic WoW was a time when things were simpler, leveling was a journey, gear upgrades were a bigger deal, and everything took a bit more time, leading to that much more
True.
satisfaction when you crossed the next big hurdle. Everything was just right. Or was it? Recently on the channel, we've talked about some of the more memorable things in Classic, such as the opening of AQ40 or the
You know what this reminds me of? Like, I remember getting my first blue item in World of Warcraft and I freaking freaked out. Like, look at this, I have a blue item. And I was like showing this to my friends. I was like going crazy about it. And nowadays, like, especially while retail, you get like almost from the start like purple gear and stuff. Like, it's just so easy to get that stuff, right? Like, it's insane. Like, back in the day, if you had like one blue item, it was like, ooh, such a big deal. Now you have a purple item, so what?
the PvP system.
It's really like
and today
that.
I thought it might be fun to remember some of the more, how can I put it, painful things about this version of the game. Stuff you can look back at and say, oh yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it? And don't get me wrong, each of these in their own way added to the game and made it what it was. And some people will prefer Classic because of these gameplay differences, not in spite of them. Classic had so many unique, fun interactions and features which set it apart from any other version of World of Warcraft. But on the other hand, it could certainly create scenarios that brought out the worst in people, or just naturally seemed to cause problems. Between loot, PvP, guilds, and player-made drama, this has to be the worst of Classic WoW. Speaking of the worst things to happen, you know those spam texts and emails that you keep on getting? Well, with 68% more data breaches in 2021 compared to the year before, it's not about to improve anytime soon. But Incogni has the solution. Data brokers are aggregating your personal information and selling it on to unknown businesses for their own benefit. Now, the good news here is, as an individual, you have the right to request the deletion of this data from brokers. The bad news is they're going to make this as long-winded as possible because your details are their paycheck. This is where Incogni comes in. It's as simple as signing up, informing them whose data they will be removing, granting the right to work on your behalf, and then you can kick back and wait for the results. They'll know where to look and how to handle the inevitable objections. You can even...
I think that's actually the same with if you delete certain pictures on, for example, Facebook or somewhere. Like, a friend of mine showed me something. He had an account, I think it was his Facebook account, and he deleted it or something, and for some reason his picture was still found under Google Picture search or something. It was very strange. Like, his account no longer existed, but his picture was there. I think it was actually Facebook, if I'm not mistaken, or was it something else like Instagram? No, I think it was Facebook. It was like weird. But yeah, like, there's so much data and information about individuals collected. And even if you delete it or you try to get rid of it, it's often still there for like months, maybe years. Like, yeah, that's a sad reality. For me, I don't care. Like, my whole life, I just show everything on the internet almost, so it doesn't matter to me. But there are some people that freaking love privacy, so yeah.
Try free for 30 days too, so there's really nothing to lose. Keep your online anonymity the way it should be. Go to incogni.com/WillE to check them out. The first 100 people to sign up also get 20% off using the link below. Many thanks to Incogni for the sponsor today. Back to WoW. So let's see, where can we start on things from Classic which were more than just a bit inconvenient? How about this little addition called spell batching, a phrase that will cause nightmares for even the most dedicated Classic player. This was a feature that was brought back to WoW Classic right at its inception. The idea behind it was to handle server-side resolution of spells more closely to what would have been the case in actual vanilla, therefore creating a more faithful representation of the game and emulating it as if we all had really bad internet. Instead of the server handling each spell the moment they were fired off, it would instead do them in batches, hence the name spell batching. This batch occurred every 400 milliseconds, so in other words,
annoying.
the game was running as if you were on 400 ping all of the time. Now, the positive upside of this, if you can call it that, is that certain spell interactions present in vanilla would be there in Classic, such as two mages polymorph.
This happened to me once when I was a low level. I was like grinding a character, and that it was in PvP environment. So I was like leveling on a PvP server, and then someone attacked me. And I don't know if it was lag or what it was, or if this was from spell batching or something. So this person attacked me, but I didn't take damage for 2 seconds or so, and then I randomly died. Maybe it was just lag, but it was weird because I was hit, but I lived for 2 more seconds, and then I just died. It was so strange.
Morphing each other at the same time, or 2 warriors charging each other, and just a whole host of other random weird interactions.
Yeah, some
In
delay
reality,
and stuff.
looking back, it was bad. Like, really bad. The warrior mains out there will remember pressing execute, having your rage bar go to 0, and then the mob dies before the spell is processed on the batch window and you do no damage. The same with taunting mobs.
Maybe
it was just
that's how I
very
died.
slow.
It wasn't
Playing
processed
Alliance at
for
the
2
time, it was
seconds.
not uncommon to throw Blessing of Protection on someone, and another paladin would do the same, and they would end up with several forbearance at the same time. And of course, everyone's blessing went on cooldown too. But the worst experience had to be for
Healing.
healers. You just couldn't reliably play a clutch healer. The amount of times I pressed lay on hands or went to heal somebody, went to 0 mana, and the spell never landed and they died was just so.
And then like a healer gets kicked and he gets blamed, but they forget that there's this dispatching issue and stuff happens 2-3 seconds later. Yo, imagine like, has anyone of you experienced that you were like seeing someone was like low health and you healed them and for 2-3 seconds no heal came for some reason, they died and you got like kicked or in trouble. Like I think this happens sometimes to people. This really sucks. Like, that must be super frustrating. Holy shit, I would really hate that. But yeah, if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. And I'm glad we don't have this in retail. Like, I really hate this. Like, this is also sometimes when I play games like Elder Scrolls Online, especially in Zero Tier PvP. I had this before. I was like low health. I want to use my self-healing skill, some skill called Vigor, and this heals me on my stamina class. I use it on 20% health. And 2-3 seconds later, my healing comes. I was so upset. I was like, I could have outlived that. Like, I could have survived that. I could have went to this one tower there because some players were like chasing me, and I could have survived that. But because there was some delay and my skill happened seconds later, I died. It was not even my fault because I reacted on time, but it just didn't work because there was a delay. It was like lag or something. This is why it's important that games run fluent and that the server can handle information and do this in less than a second. Otherwise, like, you can't even have reactive combat, like, be it raiding, be it PvP, even by, like, sometimes while leveling and questing and stuff.
So many, and it was so frustrating. This was the same experience for any healer. Finally, in patch 1.13.7, which was a few months after Next Remus came out in Classic, more or less in preparation for TBC by this point in time, Blizzard changed the spell batching formula, moving it from a forced 400 milliseconds to resolving as fast as it could, or by at least 10 milliseconds. Even for the seasonal servers for Classic, Blizzard decided not to bring this interaction back. Either way, spell batching was certainly an experience, and just thankfully not one we have to deal with anymore. Here's another lovely feature of Classic, which I'm more than glad is in the past. Debuff caps. So you know how in Wrath and, well, in TBC for that matter, you just used all of your abilities, your damage over time effects and so on that your class had access to. Well, in Classic, you couldn't. Anything that went above the cap would push off an old.
Well, imagine like you have a couple of Shadow Priests and a couple of Warlocks, and the issue is like, same with like you could say Druids, right? Like you have so many debuffs and dots and stuff. Like what is if you have like multiple people that play classes that have like quite many of those, and then you bring them to a dungeon or raid, and it's actually bad to bring them because you have now multiple classes that have tons of debuffs, dots and whatever. And then there's like this cap, right? So you want to make sure you have people with less of those kind of skills in a group to maximize your overall damage output. This is actually very bad. I think there should not be a cap like that because some class specs are actually suffering from that the most than others. And this creates some class balance issue. And it makes you prioritize on having each class individually there. Like you don't want to have 2 of the same class and this and that. And yeah, this just excludes a lot of players from actually doing content. It sucks.
older and often more valuable debuff from a boss. They were categorized too into major debuffs such as Sunder Armor. These were the big actively applied ones that benefited the whole raid. Medium such as Corruption from Warlocks. These are often actively applied but only a personal DPS gain. And minor debuffs such as Deep Wounds, which were passively applied DPS gains. In original vanilla, the debuff cap was 8. Now, hypothetically, one Shadow Priest to DPS in any capacity needed at least 3 debuff slots.
Yes!
Or if they wanted to use Vampiric Touch.
So what if you have 2 or 3 Shadow Priests?
40 players in a raid.
Yeah.
I think you can see how this had the potential to be a little bit problematic. Thankfully, in patch 1.7, that's ZG, Blizzard doubled the debuff cap up to 16, which was a lot more forgiving. And when we launched with Classic, we had this same level of cap in place. All of the same, it was not uncommon to have a raid sheet prior to even stepping into a 40-man raid with the debuffs which you are allowed to do. Let me tell you right now, Serpent Sting, nope. Moonfire, no. Devouring Plague, no. Any minor damage over time effect, basically no. Debuff slots were all taken up by the big effect slot buff for the whole raid, not personal DPS gains. Eventually, Blizzard raised the debuff cap to 44 TBC, which functionally removed it, and then went on to literally remove it for Wrath. But yeah, in vanilla, you really weren't able to make the most of your class's full toolkit just because of this limitation. Speaking of debuff caps, why not move on to class balance, a term that I use very loosely for Classic, because it wasn't balanced at all, not even remotely close, in fact. I suppose this is a side effect of releasing on last patch and then not changing classes at all ever afterwards, but there was such a big difference between the top and bottom damage dealers in Classic. Here, for example, is the last 2 weeks of 90th percentile passes for Wrath Classic.
Unholy Death Knight,
There's definitely some winners in this list, and it's important to realize there will always be winners, but the majority of classes at least have one fairly solid spec.
It actually sucks that if you play a druid, you're actually one of the lowest DPSs. Like, look at this. Like, even the one spec that some people say is maybe the highest DPS spec, that is balanced druid. And like, look at this, like how low it is in comparison to some other classes. Like, mage performs better, warlock, shaman, rogue. Like, you are really, really at the bottom. And if you are a warrior or a shadow priest, you better just not even come. Like, yeah. Like, the difference shouldn't be that huge. Like, look at this. Like here, okay, here, like, you see, like, they're, like, so minor. But somewhere here, like, they start getting bigger. And even here, like, that's, like, a jump. It's not, like, step by step or, like, just 1% more. This is, like, looks like double percentage or even more. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Specialization. And if we scroll down and look at the number of passes per class and specialization too, I think there's a good overall representation. People are playing a bit of everything, and the majority of classes are seeing value. Here's 2 weeks of Nax 40 back in Classics.
Forces people to go with 3-4 classes.
A bit of a different story, isn't it? With one class being so clearly ahead, you'd wonder why on earth anyone would play anything else. And looking at the volume of passes per class and spec, it's a similar story too. For every Shaman DPS, Druid DPS, Priest DPS, and Paladin DPS, that's nearly half the classes in the game by the way, there were nearly 15 Warrior DPS. I don't think people were playing Classic for its stellar reputation for class balance, but looking back, I've never seen such a clear divide between the top and the bottom. But now we have our force lag, our inability to cast spells because our raid leader won't let you, and a class that's literally doing about 1/3 of the damage of the warrior that dinged last week. We now need to pick up some sweet loot so we can press Starfire rank 5 for about 40 seconds before going Fortunately, you don't have to wait to level cap for problems on loot. No, the developers have put a lot of thought into this. You'll be getting a first-hand experience on how loot will go the moment you accept that one quest in the Barrens that has you collect Zevra hooves from the apparently unhooved Zevras in the area. It's common for Classic. Just because you can see the item you need on the ground doesn't mean it's gonna drop. I mean, looking back at this quest, there's comments back from original vanilla on how bad the drop rate was. Here's another good one. This one's for the Alliance, Farron's Proof. You know the quest in South Shore that has you go collect Murloc heads from the nearby. This one always feels like more of a grind than it should be. Oh, and how about Fiery Blaze Enchantments?
I remember
that quest in the Badlands where you have to kill the whelps and drakes over on the east side of the zone for the heart.
For the scales?
I remember very well spending nearly 45 minutes on this once, and I just eventually didn't leave.
There was also one quest with scales. You have to kill NPCs and they can drop some scale, and then you have to kill them, like, you only, like, I think it was like 10 or 12 of those, and you have to kill over 100. Like, the drop rates are just ridiculous. Like, or this one with the Murlocs, oh, I remember that. Like, I wonder back in the day when they made those quests, like, if they have even tested them themselves, like the devs, before they put them out. Like, this is why it's so important if you're, like, developing a game and you're making certain quests, that you yourself test them. Like, do this quest, check your time, maybe set an alarm and say this quest should take a player, let's say 20 minutes or 15 minutes at maximum, right? And then you just test it and see if you can do this in like 15 minutes or so. If you had 15 minutes and just half of the drops that are needed, then you should consider maybe giving 10 or 15% higher drop chance or something. Like, seriously.
Until I got the drop. But eventually you get through questing and hit level cap. Now this is where the real loot drama begins. I mean, where do we even start here? The infamous Hunter memes from back in the day where they would roll on anything and everything because, I mean,
even if it's not for their class,
practically anything and everything, bar, plate armor, and maces for some reason. In practice for Classic, it wasn't the Hunters that wanted everything, it was Warriors. Leather for DPS, plate for tank, resistance sets for certain fights, physical.
Like, trust me, it's not just the warriors that want everything, or hunters or whatever class. It's just like, I think it's the reaction actually. It's like, it happens automatically to players because some players are so greedy for gear and maybe they had like so much bad luck in the past that they no longer bother to even read the items. They just see, oh, there's something blue or purple. You know what? Let me just press roll. It doesn't matter. I don't read what it is. I just want to be the first to press it because maybe if you press early, you have more of a chance or you're more lucky to get it. But that's not how rolling actually works. But some people believe that if you roll at first or second, your percentage chance you get it is higher or something, but that's not true. Like, it doesn't matter in which order you roll from what I know. So yeah, but it is like a automatic reaction. Like, people are hungry for gear, they think it's something they could maybe use, they don't want to bother reading because they feel like if they don't press it immediately they're gonna lose the item, what is not true. And yeah, that's how stuff happens like that. That's how I see it.
Mitigation sets for others. You need your PvP set, one-handed weapons for Fury, two-handed for arms, shield for tanking. Oh, and that healer gear? Yeah,
they
believe
go
it or
even
not,
for
I also
freaking
need that for my
staffs and
diamond
stuff.
flask snapshot. A warrior could legitimately have
like, I'm a
dozens
warrior,
and
I
dozens
still
of
take
items
the
in their
want.
bag and find a use for all of them. And that is kind of cool, actually. But what about the fact your raid had 40 people and bosses dropped a handful of items, half of which were comically
Many
bad and were
came out
literally on
empty-handed.
permanent disenchant status? Oh boy, another shadow strike. Straight into the bin where it belongs. In fact, most classes wanted the same items too. There were just so many pieces which stood out clearly above others. Mage Blade, Talisman of Ephemeral Power, Quick Strike Ring, Onslaught Girdle, to name just a few from Molten Core alone. And every guild had an item that just didn't drop for you. I'm not even talking about bindings here either. I think between Blackwing Lair launch and AQ40 doing 2 raids a week, the guild I was with at the time saw a grand total of 2 mind-quickening gems. Every single mage wanted this item for PvP and PvE. It was so good it was still used in TBC. On the other hand, I believe we saw about 7 chromatically tempered swords in a row, which led to a lot of happy warriors and rogues about that bit of RNG. Yeah. And not getting the item you want to drop is definitely still a thing in Wrath for sure. Malagos just refuses to drop anything which isn't absolutely garbage, but when you have 40 players, it's just a little bit more noticeable as all. Oh, and final point on loot, in case you had forgotten, vanilla had...
You know, it's like funny. I actually think some friendships break like that and people get kicked out of guilds. Like, imagine you're a raid leader or someone that's like at a high rank in your guild wants a certain item and you roll for it. Now you have to worry about being freaking kicked out of the guild and they never take you raiding again because you take a certain item or so. I feel like a lot of people got into like a lot of like fights and the toxicity was just at a different level and stuff, like at a height that we can't imagine, right? Like, I think it's so crazy. Like, like your best friend becomes a competition suddenly. Like you're happy at first before you start a raid, like, oh, my friend is there, we said today at 7 p.m. Central European time or something, yeah, we will do this raid together and I'm so happy to see you, my friend. Then midway through the raid, oh, I hate this guy, he took my item, like I will never raid with him again, he's an idiot, we're no more friends or something. I feel like this actually really split like people apart, like friendships broke because of that. Like seriously.
As all. Oh, and final point on loot, in case you had forgotten, vanilla had no tier tokens either, so you knew when you killed Rag or Nefarian or any end boss, they always dropped some nice druid tier for you, and the one druid in your raid got kitted out super fast. Next, something I actually quite enjoyed. So for learning professions beyond Journeyman, you had to go to a specific trainer somewhere in the world. Now, some of them weren't too badly placed. Expert in chanting for Horde, for example,
I think that was actually good because it gave
and for
meaning
Alliance,
to,
it was just outside of Stormwind. For the most part, it was a quick...
But that is good because this gives meaning to places. Like, there is a reason why you want to go to this one building, to this one zone, and even though it forces you to go to certain places to advance in like your crafting profession and stuff, right? It is good because now it makes this place important. Now you have a reason to go to there, right? Like you have a reason to go to Westphal, for example, or why would you go to Ashenvale? Because there's this one NPC. Why go to like Silithis? And I think this is good that you have this because now you have really a reason to explore.
Quick Google, and it takes a couple of minutes to get wherever you need to be.
Yeah.
There was one big exception
It
for
shows
a
you
trainer
the whole
who
game
was just
as well,
so
right?
far away from anything else that it was kind of just annoying to have to go there.
Annoying,
you remember
yes.
where you needed to go to train Artisan Enchanting? Keep in mind that during Wrath you can just train new profession skill-ups from any trainer. In Classic though, you had to go find Anora, who is of course located in the Badlands, just outside of the entrance
surrounded
to
by
Alderman.
mobs.
As in, she's inside of the dungeon exterior, but not in the actual dungeon of Alderman itself, if that makes sense. I guess back in the day this was found and shared by complete luck, but you clear this random pack of scorpions and she will appear just behind you. This kind of made it somewhat inconvenient to do on a lower level, though you did have to be at least level 35 to advance to the artisan level of a profession, but otherwise you had to go and fight your way through to get to this point, and unless you had prepared materials to level up as you were there, you were gonna need to make multiple trips here too. I mean, I get it, having trainers out in the world who are the only ones to advance you to the highest tier of profession is cool and all, but Anora, could you just, you know, leave the scorpion pit when we find you for the first time maybe? Would that make sense at all? Let's move on though,
Yeah,
because as
convenient.
things tend to be, the real worst stuff wasn't just the minor inconveniences of the game or things taking a little longer than maybe they could have. The real best of Classic, and often the worst, were the people on the server where you were playing. Now, people definitely bang on about server reputation and community back from vanilla, and I think mileage on that statement varies a lot from realm to realm. But
I actually like that. I think it's better like this than to have phases, and you go somewhere and in one visit, let's say to Stormwind, you only see 4 players, in the other one you see 15 players and stuff, and then you have like those different phases, like the instances that I actually think yeah, I like the old way more because it made capital cities feel more alive. Like if you go to Orgrimmar, for example, in like classic WoW or like vanilla days, like the city is always busy. And now, yeah, you still see like maybe like 20 players or something, but you're like sometimes wondering, do like a lot of people still play WoW? Why are there just 20 players? Why are 5 at the bank, 2 in front of the inn, 9 at the auction house, 2 are just standing somewhere on the road, 1 is talking to an NPC for whatever reason. Like, it's kind of like that these days. And it depends also on what time you log in, right? But if you go there in like vanilla days, like wow, you will see like 50 players or more sometimes. I miss this actually. Like I wish I could see more than 20 players at once.
What was true for certain is that other players could have a much greater degree of impact on other people's games, for the better, or in many cases, the worse. When the PvP system released in Classic WoW without Battlegrounds present, players took to farming honor from lower level characters out in the world, and on some servers
I fell
even
victim to
resorted to
that,
ganking
but I
inside
died
of
with
the
delay.
opposite faction's capital
Same
cities
benching.
because of how fast player numbers dropped in response to the relentless
Killed an
ganking.
AFK
And
player.
when Battlegrounds were released, they wouldn't even prove a reprieve, as pre-mades of fully geared and prepared players would crush pugs in a matter of minutes to min-max their honor
That's
gains.
true.
And don't even get me started on how CC chains worked in vanilla. What are they capped at now? About 8 or 10 seconds maximum thereabouts? Well, in vanilla, sometimes you get hit by a polymorph and you just sat there doing nothing for 30 seconds straight. And then it gets recast again and you're sitting there for another 10 seconds.
Yeah, if they had like improved the performance, this and that, and they balanced stuff more, it would be fun. But those kind of combats here are the ones I enjoy in PvP the most. Like, dueling is fine, having 2v2, 4v4 and stuff. But like, imagine you have like combats where you are like more than 8 people or like 10 people and you fight against another 10 people or more. Like, this is just so much more fun, I think, because those huge combats, they feel like you are actually really in some true battle or something, or you're fighting for something important. Like, each time I see those big fights, I always think, oh, there's something important we are fighting for or something, right? If you have like this kind of small scale combats, like 4v4, 2v2, it's kind of like, what are we even fighting for? But if you have like those huge battles, 10 plus players against 10 plus, it's like you're fighting for like a whole kingdom or something, or something is like super important, right? And then if you win with your team, it's actually super rewarding. It feels so cool and fun. It's like, yeah, our army crushed the other army or something. It was like, I think this is really fun. I wish we had more big PvP fights like that these days.
Gets recast again and you're sitting there for another 10 seconds.
And
you can see why traps
somewhere,
eventually got put on these things. Being CC'd for as long as a trash mob isn't too fun on the receiving end. But the cause of often the most drama had to be from world buffs. I'm not going to go over all the efforts it took to assemble them here. I did do a video on it a little while ago though, so you can check that out if you wanted some more info. Suffice to say, raiding as a whole was shaped around collecting these buffs that made you do a ton more damage.
And if you lose it, you have to get it again.
You really did have to play around them. During the final patch, the same one as where they removed spell batching, Blizzard would go to introduce the Chronoboon Displacer. This would absorb your world buffs, pausing their timers and storing them to use at a later date. This meant you could, you know, play your class up until raid time, not have to worry about people who would hide characters around the world and try and dispel your buffs. More worrying is that people spent their time doing this, to be honest, and have everything ready for raiding when you stepped inside of an instance. When I think about this and look back to world buffs, it makes me realize I really don't miss them. Not only due to the whole factor of having to go and collect them, but what they meant for raiding. You can't have a decent progression fight alongside players potentially being 30% more or less powerful, and as great as the Chronoboon was, it wouldn't change that either. This is something, one of many things, which sets Classic apart from any other version of World of Warcraft, and many players do prefer this version of raiding, or at least a version of raiding with the Chronoboon Displacer. Who knows, maybe Season of Mastery 2 will answer this demand. There are even a few more things I could have covered here. The one-button rotations, Biss from world bosses.
No, I don't like this kind of stuff, because I hate playing after schedule. Like, I don't like to have to make freaking appointments with other people. Like, we have to play at this time on this day, this and that. Like, it's okay to do this sometimes, but if you have to do it all the time, it's so annoying. Like, this is something what I love about, like, retail when it comes to Mythic Plus. You can just use Dungeon Finder. And if you don't know when on a certain day you are free from work or you have time to play, like, it is better to have something like that, like Mythic Plus and Dungeon Finder, than to have to make appointments. Then you have to farm out freaking world buffs on a certain appointment. You have like, literally you have 2 appointments to do a raid. One appointment is to grab the world buff, right? And the second appointment is to actually be at the actual raid. And wasn't it like that like before this Chromie thingy came, that you would like need to like log off, if I'm not mistaken, correct me in the comments section if I'm wrong, you would need to log off and you can't play with your character, do crafting or anything, make gold, until the appointed time with the guild for raiding. I think people just didn't play the game until, let's say, a certain day, a certain time, because they wanted to keep the duration of the world buff. Because if you logged out, I believe, the timer was paused as well, right? Or am I wrong about that? I think it was like that, right? Yeah, so your character became unplayable for some days until everyone was ready to raid, and you just wouldn't log back in, and that sucked.
And having to camp them, the list very much could go on. And despite all this, despite it being called the worst of Classic, I still like Vanilla as a game a lot. It definitely has a ton of janky things, which by modern standards just wouldn't work in other games, let's be honest.
It was more
but
challenging.
It's also proven to be a little
Even
more than
questing
just
was
a bit
hard.
of nostalgia. There's something in Classic which realizes that maybe it's not always correct to sacrifice something that's good to try and make it perfect. That's about everything I've got for today. If there's anything else you think I should have included, do let me know down below. Maybe I can do a follow-up. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. I'll see you all in the next one very soon.
Okay. But yeah, what I like the most about Classic WoW is, and you guys are going to laugh at me for this, and I think, what the heck, is this really the reason what you love about like WoW Classic, why you like this game? It's actually, I can die while questing. I'm not kidding. Like, I love it where I have like a new character, I'm leveling him up or her, and I have like a hard time questing and stuff. Like, there's a quest I must do, and I returned the quest in on 10% health, and I almost died killing 3-4 mobs or something. I love this so much. Like, I miss this so much in modern MMOs, where you have like a quest where you need to kill an elite or something, and while doing this you drop very low on health, and if you're not focused you even freaking die, and you have to attempt another try to kill just an elite or pull 2-3 mobs at a time and stuff, and you barely survive. Like, this is what I love the most about Classic WoW, because any content was a challenge basically until endgame. I mean, if you're endgame you can literally rush through zones and kill everything almost, but like early game, the challenge, I loved this so much. I wish retail was more difficult while questing and leveling, and same in like other MMOs. I feel like New World is crazy simple these days. Like ESO, it's insanely simple. Even Final Fantasy 14, I find like questing way too simple. Only dungeons is hard. And I actually wish every MMO had also more difficult questing. Like, I think the best balanced difficulty was during vanilla WoW days and classic WoW when it comes to questing. I think all MMOs should have that. You make one character, and at the early game you can only fight against 2 or 3 mobs at a time. But in retail you can pull 5-6 mobs from the start and just nuke them. You're not even low health. Like, seriously. So yeah, I miss this. I wish PvE was more difficult. Only like high keys are difficult these days, and heroic raids. Like, even normal raids these days are a joke in like WoW retail. Like, you want to go at least heroic or mythic to have a bit of I break a little sweat or something, right? But yeah guys, if you are new to this channel, please don't forget hit that subscribe button for more content. Let me know in the comment section what you hated or what you loved about classic WoW, or you still love and still hate about it if you're still playing it. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. I will see you guys next time.